Hello, and welcome to Book Circle. I'm Earl Weinberg. This time we will continue our reading of The Demon Priest by Jim Burroughs. Chapter 9. Aftermaths. Eventually, Maddie showed up with Novak and told the special ops guys that the chief of station wanted to see us. The father went with Maddie, and TC followed them in his car with Selena, Hawk, and me. Naturally, the kid was nowhere to be seen. Turns out that the new Acadia station chief is Simone Lafort, the woman of bronze herself, one of Falcon's best-known metahuman agents. She already had Luca with her in a conference room when Maddie brought us in. Chief Lafort stepped out from behind the table and offered Father Gregory her hand. "It's good to meet you face to face, Reverend Gregory," she said, with a slight but noticeable Acadia accent. "Your name keeps popping up. Won't you all take a seat?" Once we were all sitting, she shuffled a small stack of files. "I see that you and your sidekick are now registered as independent metahuman public safety operatives, but your friends here are not." The father just nodded. "That offers you a certain amount of official sanction for the use of your powers and other actions in the aid of the alleged kidnap victims. Still, you're skating a bit close to the edge at times." She turned to Selena. "And you, Ms. Costello-Gomez, you called the Falcon just prior to this latest fracas, offers you and your associates some cover. Still," she sighed. "I didn't feel that I could ignore the needs of my neighbors. It didn't seem consistent with my calling. I apologize if it causes you trouble," said the father. "So in your fashion you were acting as a priest?" "That is not how I would have expressed it. I'm retired, and it was not so much my priestly duty as my moral duty. If I am to take fleshly form, not for my own pleasure, but in hopes of ministering to others, then I must act accordingly to fleshly and human morals, or so it would seem to me. And with extraordinary power comes equivalent responsibility? That's very much how the bookkeeper expressed it when we were discussing how to fill out the registration documents that your organization requires." "Yes, it's a standard justification. The registration legislation even alludes to it." "I sense that there is something more behind your questions, your interest in my status as a priest." The chief smiled and nodded. "Yes," she said, "it's a matter of whether you are acting singly, perhaps with the aid of a sidekick, or as a leader within an organization, acting in some sort of official role." "And if I were, would that then offer some sort of sanction or protection to others, to my associates?" She hesitated, then seemed to, surrender. "Yes," she said eventually, "as the leader of an organization, a charitable or religious organization, you would bear some responsibility for the members, but you could also offer a certain legitimacy." "You mean," asked Selena, "that if you were forced to deal with us as members of a church, we'd be better off than if you or other law enforcement organizations classified us as a street gang?" "I'm not suggesting any specific course of action for either you outcasts or Father Gregory. I'm just trying to understand the situation and its ramifications." "I see. And as you understand the situation and ramifications, does it make a difference if I and St. Michael's are part of a larger denomination or are non-denominational?" "Well, you claim to be part of a larger church, the local diocese that St. Michael's was part of, for instance. If you claim that, of course, their leadership would have to acknowledge or certify your relationship." "But if I were to be on my own, a priest that had voluntarily separated himself from a church that generally does not believe in laicizing the clergy, and open St. Michael's as an unaffiliated, non-denominational church?" "Then if you did all the proper paperwork, yes, you could be an independent church and take responsibility for those working under your auspices, and it might be to everyone's advantage." I see. Father Gregory got real quiet and stared, starting to do that reading things up in the air look of his. The meeting kind of wound down at that point. Chief Lafort told us that there was an ongoing investigation into the day's happenings, and that Agents Jardin and Novak were in charge of Falcon's part of it. When they told us we could go, we drove over to the household to meet with the bookkeeper and her lawyers, and pretty soon the paperwork was started for organizing the Church of St. Michael and All Angels of New Acadia. St. Michael's was about to be a church again. I should have realized what that meant was going to happen next, but no, I was surprised when Reverend Schiller, the angry priest from the diocese, showed up. Of course, they'd heard about it, and he got a bug up his... Anyway, he showed up and was his usual cheery self, all bent out of shape about us, about the Father opening St. Michael's as a church. He went on and on about how Father Gregory had better make it really, really clear that he and St. Michael's had nothing to do with the church, the diocese and all, and how they'd have their eye on him, making sure he didn't go around defrauding people and misrepresenting himself, St. Michael's, or the church, and how we'd be really sorry if we did. Father Sam, he was real patient with the angry priest, all calm and smiling and head nodding. He really is a saint, you know. Well, maybe not a literal saint, but he had like the patience of one. Guess that's kind of why he's the superhero. Me, I just try to be a good sidekick. I ain't no angel, you know. So, after Schiller had been giving us the benefit of his fire and brimstone for an hour or so, Maddie showed up. Well, I guess it was Special Agent Madeleine Jardin, really. She was all serious and businesslike. When she saw that the angry priest was like on some sort of endless loop, she stepped in and apologetically... That kind of apologetic that cops and powerful people do to let you know that, sorry or not, they're about to get what they want and you're about to be inconvenienced. Well, she said that she was there as part of a time-critical investigation, and perhaps Father Gregory could get back to him? The angry priest didn't get any less angry or annoying, but he did get gone, which was a good thing. Perhaps we could retire to your office back in the parish house, Father. This could take a while. Unless you'd sooner come down to headquarters? She asked while Henri was leading Schiller out of the church. Once we got to the parish house, Agent Jardin smiled, and suddenly it was just Maddie. After all, Father, it'll take us a while to order pizza, make the bread, and pour the drinks, she said. So instead of the office, we went upstairs to the Father's quarters. Maddie ordered a couple of pizzas, while the Father and I got down the stuff for making pan bread and milk and honey with rum. Once she'd got off the phone, Maddie pulled out her little notepad and flopped into one of the wicker chairs from the living room part of the room. So I really do need a statement from you guys, but at least we can be comfortable, and with any luck we can be done before the pizza arrives. We gave her the rundown on what had happened at the warehouse. She was a lot more interested in what we could tell her about what was going on inside than a lot of details about Hawk, Snipe, and that huge gun of hers. We went with calling her Griselle instead of Snipe. That made the story a lot simpler. Selina and the Father had given me a lookout and a bodyguard to keep me safe. Everyone was happy with that. Henri came up after he'd gotten rid of the angry priest and stayed out of the way in one of the other wicker chairs, listening to us telling Maddie about our adventures. He was pretty quiet, just smiling and nodding, but he seemed to enjoy the story. Father Gregory didn't stop at the point where Falcon showed up. He went over the talk with Chief Lafort and how the idea came up of turning St. Michael's into a real active church. Maddie pointed out that the chief wouldn't have actually recommended any particular course of action, just that our emerging plans had been, discussed with her. Falcon and the cops don't get directly involved in such things. We all got that, including Henri. Maddie thought the idea, which, hadn't been her boss's, was a pretty good one. While we were talking about it, Selina and TC showed up about the same time as the pizza, carrying some quesadillas and churros. They liked the idea of St. Mike's being a church again, too, so we sat around and made plans for having some sort of parish meeting soon with TC's Aunt June, Theo and his mother, and all the rest of the neighbors who might want to be part of the congregation. Eventually, everyone else went home, and I flopped in the guest room. I doubt if it was all the food. I don't know if it was all the food or the stuff that happened at the warehouse, but I didn't sleep too well. Bad dreams. Sometime in the middle of the night, I woke up hearing my name being called. Lee. It came softly from outside my room, again and again. I wasn't really all that awake as I sat up and looked around. You know how it happens, when as you wake up you're not sure where you are or what's going on. Lee. After a while I recognized the guest room. I was in the parish house. Lee, it whispered. Curiosity started to get the better of me. I got up and made my way across the dark room to the door. Lee, quietly in the distance. I opened the door and crept out of my room and down the corridor, making as little noise as I could. The floorboards creaking seemed really, really loud anyway. Lee. I followed the sound down the stairs, out into the cloister. From there I made my way quietly to the porch. I could see some sort of weird bluish light shining out through the stained glass windows of the chapel. Lee. The door creaked as I opened it. The chapel and the nave beyond were dark and filled with shadows. I stepped down into the chapel. I could just make out the statue of St. Michael standing with one foot on the devil's back, the tip of the wavy blade of his sword at the devil's throat. St. Michael slowly turned his head to look at me. His eyes seemed to drill into me while his mouth and the rest of his face smiled. I don't know, is placidly the right word? It was like only his eyes were alive and cared about me, and they were digging down into my soul. His eyes were like little burning suns. The rest of him was just carved from wood. Then the devil turned to look at me too, the point of the sword pulling at his neck. He leered at me, a nasty smile on his lips, and his eyes flashed with a fire like burning metal. The angel flexed his wings and spread them out wide. They were gleaming white, and now St. Michael's skin was a glowing golden color, and his pure white silk robes fluttered in the breeze. Sunlight sparkled off his armor. His eyes were shining like the brightest blue sky you ever saw. The demon squirmed under his foot, muscles rippling beneath his blood-red skin as he struggled. His curly black hair tumbled down, almost hiding one of those burning eyes of his. "Beware," said the voice. The devil reached a taloned hand out toward me. Someone screamed and screamed. "Lee," said a voice, trying to suck me in or blow me up. I kept screaming. "Lee," said the father, "it's all right." I sat up straight. "You were dreaming, Lee. It's all right." He smiled and sat down at the edge of the bed. I was in a panic. I just knew that things were lurking in the corners. Shadows moved in the dark. Somewhere a soft, soft voice was laughing. Where was I? The father reached out and touched my cheek, and just for a flash, the teeniest moment, it was like I was looking at an old picture that was double exposed. Father Samuel in human flesh was still there, but there was a slightly larger, transparent, red devil there too, with horns and a leering smile that distorted his face so that he hardly looked like Father Gregory at all. The screaming was getting really annoying. I wished it would just stop, and then it did. "It's okay," said Father Gregory, the only Father Gregory, the human-looking one. "It was just a bad dream. You're safe here in my home." "I am?" I asked. The things in the shadows tittered. The voices scoffed. I didn't feel safe. My heart was pounding. Somewhere, eyes, one's like starlight in a blue sky and one's like burning metal, were watching me. My chest hurt from how hard and fast I was panting. "Really?" he said, softly, gently. "I don't know," I answered and closed my eyes. That made everything worse. Now I could see the burning and sparkling eyes and the shadows moving in the dark. I slammed my eyes wide open. I hugged the blankets tight and pulled my knees up, curled into a tight ball. Father Gregory sat with me quietly for a long time until I was starting to feel better. When I was okay to be alone, he got me a warm glass of milk with olive oil and honey. I think it works even better as comfort food than plain old warm milk because it's our thing, a St. Michael's thing. After a while, I went back to sleep. I don't know if I really slept any better, but at least I don't remember any more bad dreams. So the next day, we met with a few of the most interested neighbors and worked out that the church organization would be run by a vestry board and that Father Gregory would, at least for now, continue to own the property and buildings and let the church use them to meet. With that settled, we started planning a bigger neighborhood meeting in a few days. Meantime, the father would meet with the lawyers to work out a proposal to present. For a while, at least, it seemed like we were all just people, neighbors, organizing to look out for each other. I didn't really expect that to last, but it was real nice having a place that felt like home. I really couldn't remember when a place and a bunch of people felt like home. Now we had St. Mike's, the father, and the outcasts. Of course, not everyone was all that happy with the idea of a demon priest and a bunch of meta outcasts, but, whatever. Retrospectives 7. On the Hidden Road. 1988, more or less. The journey to Silverfish was largely uneventful. Twice they saw dragons in the sky off to starboard, but they kept their distance. The water of the Dansheen was like that of the Black. The water of the Dansheen, like that of the Black, was decidedly otherworldly. Both glistened with a light of their own, whereas the Black's dream water sparkled with the blue light of the distant lightfall. The Dansheen's glow was that of the silvery moon. The trees along the shore, like those along the Black, were not green, but silvery or black. Still, whereas the trunks of those that fed on dream water were odd, curling, and twisted, those in twilight were more familiar, looking like oak and ash, birch and elm, cedar and pine, even if their foliage was of an unusual hue. Twilight seemed eldritch and fey, where the lands in and around Dream were fantastic, mad, and bizarre. It was strange enough that Whim knew he was not in the mortal land he knew at home, but didn't make him feel as if madness might close in upon him. Still he was alert and wary as they stepped down the gangway to the silverwood planking of the docks. Silverfish was a thriving community. The port and marketplace were bustling with activity. The architecture was a mishmash, looking like a cross between a small New England fishing village and something out of a fairy tale, with tall peaked roofs and gleaming whitewashed walls. Fishermen, craftsmen, and merchants operated out of pushcarts and cozy little cottage-like buildings. And the denizens themselves. Many were human, and others represented the fey races Whim knew from the neighborhoods occupied by the pub in Dream, but there were many others. Hunters with an African cast that he would have called black if it weren't for the tall, sharp-featured folk with skin the color of obsidian and long hair like silky silver. An old man with skin like tree bark walked by in deep conversation with a beautiful winged woman dressed only in leaves. A plump fellow with a ruddy complexion and wearing a leather apron waved from the Dutch door of one of the largest of the thatched-roofed cottage-like buildings. "Walker! Walker, my friend!" Walker returned the wave and walked to the merchant's shop with Whim in his wake. "What brings you to Silverfish? Will you be needing supplies?" "A bit of a quest," Walker replied. "My friend Whim here is looking to travel the hidden road." "Aye, the road, eh? Well, then you'll be wanting to be properly supplied." He smiled and turned to Whim, saying, "Welcome, young sir. You're traveling in goodly company. May you be as well supplied and accoutred. 'Twould be my pleasure to assist in that. Come in, come in. The merchant, who was called Olin, fussed over Whim and his outlandish garb and equipment, but eventually pronounced his grudging approval of the apparel at least, and actually seemed pleased at the quality of Whim's outlandish footwear. His pack and its contents, on the other hand, were declared to be totally insufficient for the hidden road. Renewing whey bread and an ever-filled water skin were the barest minimum, and by preference there should be a wineskin as well, ever-filled, of course. Where, after all, did Whim think he was going? And what of a good cloak, large enough to shelter beneath, or one that would expand? No, totally inadequate, not for the hidden road. And had he a token, an amulet, a guide to show him the way? A compass, you mean? Yes, one bound to his home, or the halflands at least. A three-sided discussion of magnetic compasses and the lack of a magnetic field in the halflands, or any world that was not a spinning ball, ensued, with a certain amount of perplexity on both Whim and Olin's sides. Quite some time passed before Whim was equipped, and then some more, while Olin was talked into insulting Walker by accepting payment from him on behalf of the Outlander. In specie, taking gold from someone of Walker's quality? Outlandish. Yet, when they exited Olin's shop, Whim could not tell that any time had passed. The twilit sky looked much the same as when they had arrived. Walker pointed out that the moon had moved from here to there, but Whim had not marked its location when they'd stepped in. "There's an inn nightward of here on the outskirts of town," said Walker. "Let us at least sup there and rest if you've the need." "Very well." "And perhaps you should take a few coins. I'm happy to pay. I've far more than I need, but coin is only asked of strangers and the untrustworthy. It will be easier if you're the one who offers payment." "How would you offer to pay a local? Barter?" "No. As with the Halflands and most adjacent realms, Twilight operates largely using a gift economy." "Gift economy? Is that like barter but with credit, implicit IOUs?" "It can work that way, but more often it operates on paying forward and trust, at least among neighbors and members of the same blood." "Blood?" "Think of it as somewhere between tribes and species. Humans, fairies, dwarves, for instance. But in a place like Silverfish, where the bloods mix, neighbors, fellow residents, are often just as trusted." "And no one cheats?" "Of course they do, but anyone who makes a serious habit of it without need is likely to be ostracized, paid, and charged in coin." "I see, I think. So, as a foreigner, you should offer to pay. At some point you will develop a reputation, or be considered a member in good standing, and they will begin to refuse. If they do, do not push payment upon them." "What sort of gifts would be expected of me?" "Anything that you can share or make. Your knowledge, stories, a helping hand, a shoulder to lean on, or an ear to bend. Treat people as you would family, and with a generous heart. Don't worry. It will be easy for you, Reverend Whitcomb." Whim took the proffered coins and thanked Walker. "Tell me," he asked after a few paces, "is there a particular protocol regarding saying thank you and the like?" Walker smiled. "You catch on quickly, Whim. Yes, the manners around saying thank you aren't quite what you're used to. It is very human and outlandish at that. Fairies, fey-folk in general, don't say thank you, and don't take it well if you do. Saying it does two things. First, it creates in you an obligation of a return favor. Second, by converting it, it turns a good-hearted kindness into an obligation, and so negates the essential selflessness of the act. It becomes transactional. So instead of turning it into a promissory note for a favor, you more honor the kindness by doing a similar or preferably even greater kindness to another, spreading the kindness and making the world better." "That's rather like the basis of the gift economy." "Exactly. So, never thank the Fae. And here's what makes it complicated. Nor anyone who lives according to Fae standards and traditions. Not being Fae, you cannot see who is a Fae friend, so you will never know who that is. and not all who live by their ways have been recognized as Fey friends. So, in general, unless you know someone is an outlandish human from mortal lands, it is best to treat them by Fey customs. Good for you for anticipating that. We will follow Whim deeper into the twilight of the Halflands next time.